primary care is an innovative, alternative path to insurance-driven healthcare. Typically, a patient pays their doctor a low monthly membership and, in return, builds a lasting relationship with their doctor and has their doctor available at their fingertips. Welcome to the My DPC Story podcast, where each week you will hear the ever-so-relatable stories shared by physicians who have chosen to practice medicine in their individual communities through the direct primary care model. I'm your host, Marielle Concepcion, family physician, DPC owner, and former fee-for-service doctor. I hope you enjoy today's episode and come away feeling inspired about the future of patient care, direct primary care. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of My DPC Story. And today I am so honored and so excited to be talking again with Zak Holdsworth, the co-founder of Hint, as well as its CEO. So welcome, Zak, back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
This year, Hint Summit is bringing all of the people who are enthused about the future of DPC. It's the DPC Summit of Innovation. So, Zak, for the audience, especially for those who have not been to Hint Summit before, what is Hint Summit and why does Hint host Hint Summit?
Yeah, I'll start with the second part of that question. The core of our mission is to help support the DPC movement at a foundational level while we started the business. And we feel like at Hint, community is really important, supporting the community, building community, helping bring people together, helping educate people, push the boundaries. So we really want to kind of support the community as much as we can. And this event, which actually really was, when we first started it 5-6 years ago, it was really an experiment, if I'm going to be honest. I was a bit surprised that people wanted something like this. But we kind of quickly found out that there was really a lot of interest in kind of the pushing the boundaries in DPC, that sort of thinking about what are the innovations that we can, as a community, bring to market and, to help accelerate the movement? What are the things we can be doing to learn from each other? And so we decided, why don't we create the Hint Summit and make it really the sort of DPC Innovation Conference, which is what it is today. And I'm happy to go into more detail, but that's sort of the why and the what.
As you talk about building community, there's been some big changes at Hint this past year. So for those who are new to the DPC space, can you share a little bit about what Hint is and what is in the Hint ecosystem in particular that is working towards that mission of helping the DPC community grow and thrive and become the standard of US healthcare?
Yeah. So when we started the business, 8-9 years ago, we started out as basically the sort of membership management and billing system for DPCs. And at the time that, there was nothing really out there, most people were using a spreadsheet, things like that. And so that's kind of where we started. And from there, we kind of evolved our business to continue supporting our clients that were growing. And often what would happen is they would start working with employers. So we built out infrastructure to support employers. Then we had clients starting to form networks. So we built infrastructure to help sort of power their networks. And so many of the leading DPC networks run on Hint as well. And so, continued down that sort of administrative path. And more recently, we decided to, in order to continue supporting our clients, bring to market a kind of a all-in-one sort of EMR product. And so we actually made an acquisition late last year. And so now we've kind of launched the Hint all-in-one product, which really seeks to, the intention of that product is really to be a simple, affordable solution for startup DPCs. And so that product's now in market, which is really exciting. And we also have it's part of our offering, what we call a DPC accelerator, which is something actually we're bringing to Summit this year again, which is exciting, which is really about helping educate and help accelerate people's journey through DPC. So it's education, assets, we've got cohort-based learning, there's kind of one-on-one coaching, things like that. And we also are working to help drive growth in the movement through Hint Connect, which is making it really easy for entities that want to work with DPCs at scale to do that. So those are some of the things we do. And then, of course, there's Hint Summit as well.
When it comes to Hint Summit, let's get into the details. Where is Hint Summit going to be and when is it going to be?
Yeah, so Hint Summit is going to be in San Diego this year, which is super exciting, from the 20th of September to the 23rd. There's an opening party, and then on the 23rd, there's a DPC Accelerator Day after the closing party.
And the theme this year is Infuse, Connect, Energize, and Calibrate. So with that theme in mind, can you share with the audience, who is Hint Summit perfect for?
Yeah, Hint Summit is really great for groups that are learning about DPC and want to be inspired by seeing what some of the other kind of DPC leaders are doing. So it's a really high energy, I'd say, it's a good way to get inspired, if you will. We try to put on a good show and bring, great people together that are representative of the DPC community. But it's also really excellent for groups that have figured out how to scale their business, but are wanting to, kind of accelerate their growth, and you kind of learn from others and what's working for other groups. So there's going to be kind of content that's designed around helping kind of accelerate the movement as well. And then it's also relevant for folks that are maybe adjacent to DPC, that are really interested in working with DPCs and kind of getting an understanding of what's important to them, or connecting or networking with DPCs. So we have quite a few, I'd say, groups that are out there that are kind of collaborating with DPCs, but aren't necessarily a DPC clinic. Many whom actually sponsor, which it's quite cool. You get to kind of collaborate with a curated list of sponsors. There'll also be quite a few kind of deep benefit advisors and kind of groups that are trying to figure out how can we actually work with DPC with employers. And so there's kind of a cohort of advisors and brokers that'll be there as well. And yeah, anyone that's just really passionate about transforming healthcare. We believe at Hint that the way to transform US healthcare is by kind of reimagining primary care and basically restoring the integrity of primary care, and that direct primary care is the most appropriate way to do that. And so there's other entities, groups there that are really passionate about broad scale healthcare transformation, that get a lot of energy from seeing this community thriving, really.
It's so true. And, for those of you who have been to Hint Summit, that happens every time you turn around. You meet a new person, you have no idea what industry they're coming in from, but they are there to play in the ecosystem of how do we make primary care better and accessible for everyday people in this country. So I love that is, the mission that you guys built Hint Summit off of. Now, in terms of the proof is in the pudding, from people who were surveyed about attending Hint Summit, 97% enjoyed their overall Hint Summit experience based on previous Hint Summits.
I want to know who the 3%, what do we miss?
I don't know, but those people might not have answered the survey, but 95% of people found networking opportunities that were valuable. And, we've talked about this in previous Hint Summit previews, but it is incredible that you literally can turn around and your dream of DPC can go from this little thing that you could possibly do to, wait a minute, you're a person who's working with a school district in my neighborhood. I could work with you, yada, yada, yada. It literally, because the summit is focusing on the innovation in the space of DPC, people are talking about the future all the time, wherever you go. And so really, coming to the summit with open eyes and open ears and open minds, it's just really important for people to understand that this is a summit where you don't even know necessarily how much of an impact it will make on you. And those are just little, nuggets of data that can go behind that. So when we talk about not only where is it going to be, when is it going to be, and who is it for, I want to talk about the lay of the land. You mentioned there was going to be an opening party. Let's start there. Where's the opening party going to be, and what's the opening party for? Should people make sure that they buy their airline tickets so they don't miss the opening party?
I absolutely recommend making the opening and closing party. One of the things that, and actually let me just comment on a point you made, which is one of the pieces of feedback that we get is that generally people leave pretty inspired and kind of excited and kind of restored in their passion for DPC at Hint Summit. And so for me, that's like a real win. And so I think they're just sort of mirroring kind of what you mentioned there. But yeah, in terms of the, and actually, honestly, for me as well, like, I get a lot of energy. It's the event I sort of, it restores me as well. Because, running a business, can be a drag sometimes, but Hint Summit brings it all back to like, it charges me up for another year type of thing. So in terms of the opening and closing parties, yeah, one of the things we like to do at Hind is throw a good party. And the Port Pavilion is where we're hosting the event. In terms of the opening party, where it's going to be on the bay with live music, coastal cuisine, and refreshing cocktails. So it's going to be a pretty cool opening party. I don't want to sort of do too much spoilers there, but I recommend the opening party. It's going to be on the rooftop of the Intercontinental overlooking the bay. So it's going to be pretty cool, pretty chic. Totally recommend you try to make the opening party. And then the closing party is going to be, it's actually going to be a live rock concert. It's Creedence Clearwater Revival, right? CCR cover band. And it's going to be pretty epic. A little bit, I'm not sure if we'll be able to top Red Rocks, but we're going to try. We're going to do our best. Red Rocks is pretty cool, but this is going to be pretty cool as well. So I recommend you stay for that.
San Diego is awesome, and you guys have picked some amazing places.
It's this pretty cool venue called Rady Shell.
Yeah, and you can see, if you're not familiar with that venue, you can look on the Summit webpage and you can see a picture of it. So check that out. I'm super pumped for Hint Summit always. I've said this before, but it was my very first summit that I ever attended in the DPC ecosystem. So I'm so excited every year when Hint Summit comes. But I think that the opening party is also really valuable, because if you're going and you're not sure, where you are in the DPC space, you haven't necessarily solidified your dream as to what you wish to do in the DPC space, the opening party is a great place for people to just relax, be social, meet people. And then going into the summit, you possibly have your own little cohort that you've created just by showing up and talking to new people. So it's definitely a grounds for opportunities to network for sure.
Yeah.
Even before the opening party, the very first DPC launch day is going to happen. So what is DPC launch day?
We've got a cohort of DPC doctors and clinicians that are launching their clinic, and they'll actually literally be launching their clinic at Hint Summit, which is really exciting. And they'll be part of a 12-week cohort of sort of launching and then getting their DPC business off the ground. So there'll be 10 or 15 brand new DPCs there. So that I'm really excited about that. This is the first year we're going to have done that.
When it comes to the first full day of Hint Summit, what does that look like?
Day one has breakfast and networking. And the general themes of day one is kind of industry analysis and physician kind of matters and growth. But going into more detail, one thing I will say is the talks that will be there or panels are peppered with DPC. One of the things we do try to do is bring a little bit of a different perspective in as well from things that may be a little bit adjacent to DPC. So, for example, we have some keynotes that are going to be really interesting. We've actually got a healthcare advocate, a sort of an artist who's also an executive coach doing kind of an inspirational talk, which is really our goal is to kind of, re-energize folks. We're going to be having, talks like, for example, like aligning your vision and interest with DPC. That's like one of the talks. So it's all around like setting vision and how do you kind of think about establishing a long-term vision, which is really important in any business, right, including a DPC business. Delicia Haynes is actually our MC, so super excited to have her this year. She got big shoes to fill, Morale. You and Clint, it's pretty good double combo there from last year. But Delicia's going to be doing a welcome and kind of an opening and sharing some of her story. We're going to have there's going to be a bunch of more breaks actually this year. One of the pieces of feedback we had was that there was almost like too much content and not enough time to network. So we're going to try to build a little bit more space in the program. We're going to have an update from the Hill, so from Jake East, so just kind of what are the latest kind of updates in terms of kind of regulatory updates. And we're going to have talks about exploring passion, how do we leverage DPC for the underserved, and then there's some talks about kind of technology as well. So that's day one, and there'll be a couple of panels, sprinkled in there as well.
I just love the breadth of speakers that you guys always have. I remember the very first conversation that I had with Dr. Janine Rodhams at Santa Cruz DPC, and she said, like, no matter what, just go to Hint Summit. And that's, what led me to Hint Summit. And I literally had no idea what Hint was at the time. I had no idea what I was going to hear. And I went as a total open book, and just hearing about all of the things that you talked about, it really gives somebody a well-rounded exposure to not only DPC now, but where DPC could be going in the future. So
I remember meeting you at that event, and
yeah, that's when you had just had your first baby girl, and she was newborn, and you and your wife and your baby girl were on stage. So I totally remember that.
Yeah.
So
I don't want to miss, and afterwards we'll have a networking happy hour as well. So that's sort of at the end of the day, there's going to be kind of some structure in terms of making sure that there's folks, place for people to network. So that'll be good. But then after that, what we found is that on end of day one, you want a bit of open time so people can go get dinner or connect or maybe go other events and things like that. So so that it'll be a pretty action-packed day
going into Hint Summit, but there were quite a few pre-arranged sponsored dinners, sponsored events, but also people had, before they even got to Hint Summit, made reservations. So it's definitely something to think about. Like, talk to the people if you know others who are going to Hint Summit, or just continue to check on the Hint Summit page for updates. Because if there's an event you want to attend and you don't know about it, it might pop up and then you're like, oh, that's for me. I definitely would encourage as much networking as possible, because that's really where you can bounce ideas off of people, get reflections on, their experience and yours as well. Yeah. Okay. So now we've heard about Thursday, full day of events, finishing up with networking. What is going to happen on Friday?
Yeah, so we're going to kick off the day with sort of breakfast and networking. So it's kind of easy. And in day two, the general theme is kind of working with employers and kind of accelerating growth or scaling DPC. We're actually having a keynote from a Dr. Hassan Tita, who's actually pretty cool. He's a combat surgeon and he's a best-selling author, and he's done a lot on humanitarian. So it's sort of a fairly inspiring talk. It should be interesting. But in terms of the kind of DPC focused content, we're having a talk on how to foster a thriving technology ecosystem. We're going to have trends in employer adoption in DPC. So there's some kind of data that we'll be presenting, which is interesting. There's actually going to be a really interesting debate, which I'm personally very excited about, which you're going to be moderating, Morale. But it's a discussion, I should say, around unsupervised advanced practice providers, or APPs, in DPC. And that's going to be the two NPs, Monica and Michael, as well as Advanced SN Dr. New on the doctor side. And it's going to be a discussion about this topic, and I think it's going to be really interesting just to kind of hear those perspectives, because I often hear those discussions happening in the sidelines, but I want to bring that discussion on stage and really flush it out. There's going to be a kind of how to drive DPC value at scale. Ryan and Strata and Rocco over at Primary Health Partners here, and Nathan from PeakMed. And so that there's going to be a great talk there. And then Dr. Bushman and Dr. Lamberts and Lauren will be talking about scaling DPCs. Lauren Tancredi will be moderating scaling DPC with MSOs. It's going to be really interesting to hear kind of Dr. Lambert's story about how he went from independent clinic into essentially an MSO running a network, which is a great story. And then I'm actually going to be having a conversation with Bib over at Frontier and Dr. Rickner at Primary Health Partner about funding the growth of your DPC, moderating conversation on kind of financing, should or should you not take financing, how to think about that topic if it comes up. And then we'll have a conversation on incorporating DPC into a comprehensive benefits package, which is, again, like a really interesting discussion and dialogue around, how do you actually work with employers to and brokers and advisors to actually integrate DPC into the health plan so that the employees actually get much better access to the care that is available to them. And then we're going to be closing out with Advanced Lassie doing a talk around inspiring the next generation of MDs. And then we're going to have the closing by Delicia, which will be really interesting sort of summary wrap. And then we've got the closing party. So that's a little bit of a snapshot. One thing I will mention, the program isn't fully locked. So, there's additional things we may be bringing in as well.
What is closing going to look like after Friday?
Yeah, so on Saturday, one thing I will say is we're going to be sending a blog, an email nearer the time just around kind of things to do in San Diego. Part of the reason we've backed it into a weekend is it's a pretty cool spot to go visit. And so I actually recommend folks, if they're able to, bring, spouse or whatever and go and actually spend some time in San Diego. It's a fun city. But in terms of the Saturday is the accelerator, DPC Accelerator Live. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the service offerings, or one of the kind of things that we really do, it's really is essentially a non-profit offering, is we have Accelerator, which is really designed around helping educate folks and have them help, give people community and coaching and mentorship in terms of how to make their DPC successful. And Mara, you're one of the A+ students in there. You've really utilized, my understanding is you really utilize that service, which is great. But what we do with DPC Accelerator Live is we try to recreate that experience, but live with folks. So I really encourage both folks that have already established and are succeeding with their DPC, as well as new DPCs are either just launched or in the process of scaling or getting started and scaling up their business, kind of to participate in this, because we really try to carve out a space that is really collaborative and sort of designed to connect the community, but specifically around how do we thrive more with our DPC business. So it's a really fun, dynamic, interactive kind of day together where we're sort of brainstorming, doing working groups, figuring out there'll be a few speakers that come in and actually share some of their insights around marketing or sales or technology, as well as just hearing from other clinicians and doctors on what it is that has worked for them.
I definitely love attending DPC Accelerator classes. And one of the huge reasons is because of the person who is running it, Lauren Tancredi. She has nearly 2 decades of experience running and rebuilding from the ground and accelerating clinics. That is her thing. And so when it comes to the focus of the DPC Accelerator, it literally is a deep dive in those topics that people are wanting to know about. And like Zach said, at any stages of DPC, the DPC Accelerator is pertinent and relevant to anybody in DPC practice. So Zach, can you add more to that?
One of the pieces of feedback we got last year is that it wasn't, there's a little bit of desire for a little bit more tangible, kind of actionable insights. And so this year we're going to be introducing these sessions where there'll be, an expert, so let's say marketing or SEO or technology or social media or internet, how to build a website, just fairly tactical things. And there'll be an expert who does a kind of a presentation. There'll be a kind of a Q&A session for, there'll be maybe 15-minute kind of talk and then 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A. But then we'll actually break it into a working session where folks can actually work on that thing with their business, and there'll be experts in the room that will be circulating around who can kind of help folks, riff with people or help them kind of think through what they're trying to work on. So it's going to be quite interactive, quite tangible, the ability to actually come away with real insights to help drive your business. That's kind of really part of the goal of the accelerator.
I love it. And those tangible takeaways are so important, especially after you're coming from a conference where your mind is filled with so many things. But I think wrapping it up after having heard the content at Hint Summit, at the regular days of Hint Summit, I think that it's really strategically great to attend DPC Accelerator, because then you're like, wait a minute, I heard this strategy. I would love to see if that could work for my community and bounce that off of an expert lifetime in person. So awesome.
Now, just on that, one of the things I'll comment is just with education generally, more often than not, it's not necessarily rocket science sometimes. So it's an insight that you might have. But if you've never been told it, or you haven't seen it, or you haven't been exposed to the idea, then you don't know, you can't know it. So that for me, Accelerator is really about bringing the best ideas and kind of exposing people to those ideas and kind of sparking kind of insights for folks they can take back and actually implement, which will have true impact on their business, hopefully fairly quickly.
So when it comes to hearing about all the DPC focused content, when it comes to Hint Summit, having heard what is going to be presented and touched on, where do people go to register for Hint Summit?
So you can go to summit.hint.com and all the information will be on there. And yeah, it should be pretty easy once you get there.
Perfect. And when people are registering, is there one ticket for all of the events, including opening and closing party, as well as DPC Accelerator? How do people look at registration if they're interested in some things, able to attend other things?
Yeah, the tickets for the Hint Summit include the opening party and the closing party. So everything's bundled and all your food and everything's included. If you want to go to the DPC Accelerator, that's an additional ticket. So totally recommend it. It's great value. And then if you're interested in the DPC launch, the day one, so DPC launch day live, then just contact our team at summit@hint.com. And that there's a little bit of a registration process for that. But if you're excited and passionate and you're really authentic about launching a DPC and you're kind of the timing works, then we'd love to have you be part of that as well.
And one of the things I had read about is sponsors who are sponsoring medical students and residents. Can you touch on that if there are medical students and residents wanting to attend as well?
So if you want to apply to that, you can just email summit@hint.com and say you'd like to apply, and someone will get back to you. There's a limited quantity of free tickets. So if we run out, what we've done is we're actually still subsidizing if you're a student. The ticket's only $100. So it's still a really good deal. I highly recommend it. So feel free to register if we don't have enough scholarships to go around.
Awesome. So again, for everybody, summit.hint.com. Register today, September 20th to 23rd in sunny San Diego. Thank you so much, Zak, for coming back onto the podcast and sharing about Hint Summit this year.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to seeing you there.
Next week, look forward to hearing from Dr. Lola Ashaye of In Touch Primary Care in Sugar Land, Texas. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you haven't yet done so, subscribe today and share the episode with a physician you may know who needs to hear about DPC. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify now as well, as it helps others to find all these DPC stories. Lastly, be sure to follow us on social media. If you're wanting to continue learning more about DPC in the meantime, check out dpcnews.com. Until next week, this is Marielle Concepcion.